this.
How am I going to turn my lights off and on with a switch?
Yeah,
what is it, the 1900s?
If you thought watching AI newscasters was bad, things got even weirder now with ChatGPT-5. Welcome to Legitimate Cybersecurity. My name is Frank Downs, and this is Dustin Brewer. Thanks again for joining us for another show. One of the things we wanted to discuss with you today is the new ChatGPT model out, ChatGPT 5.0. We talk about it a lot and how these things are used in cybersecurity, but ChatGPT has kind of taken it to the next step. But there also seems to be a little bit of fluff in there as well. So what we want to do today is discuss it, understand it, parse it a little bit, and have a better understanding of what it actually can do for people in the field of cybersecurity. So starting at that point, Dustin, let's talk about what's actually new in ChatGPT 5, right? My understanding is, I watched the Sam Altman discussion and so forth. It's basically 4.0, but better. And okay, cool, but it's a little bit interesting. I didn't see any kind of demonstration that really wowed me, similar to what I've seen with some of Google's stuff, where Google is now creating the persistent environment experience. They're illustrating persistent environments. Sorry, it's Monday. A bit better, in my opinion, in that they made an entire game world. And as you walk around and make changes to it, when you come back to it, they're still there. Did you see that?
That was really impressive. Yeah, I did see that. Yep.
And it was really, a few years ago, Altman made a really interesting statement. He said, ChatGPT is going to make movies like video games. Mm-hmm. And then he said, I have no idea what it's going to do to video games. And I felt like this was the first time, ironically, not with his company, where we saw the example where, hey, you could come up with, it was almost like that. If you remember that old game Myst, right? And the book series that went with it, where they would write a whole world in a book and then go into it kind of thing, kind of like that. But when this applies to the implications here with cybersecurity, right, is that there's a lot more computational capability, which I think is interesting because there's always the push for efficiency here, but there's also now more capability. What are your thoughts with this whole claim in greater efficiency and being able to do more? Or do you think they're just allowing us to do more, as it were? Do you think the model really improved?
Yeah, I do. I think that with any software project, there are going to be improvements. And if you start throwing billions of dollars at a software project, there's going to be massive improvements. So yeah, I do think there are improvements. I still don't see why we're calling this AI.
That's because we've been told to.
Yeah. It still is, to me, more machine learning than anything. It's still a great tool. I haven't had the chance. I played around with it a little bit, but I haven't had the chance to play around with it too much in our. Well, that's not true. I play with it in our field. I haven't had the chance to truly explore it. I've seen some folks online posting some of the things that they're doing. For example, I think I read something on Imgur today, or Imager, depending on what part of whatever.
You started a couple fights right there. That's for sure.
Yep. I'm going to call it Imgur because I'm an old man or something. I don't know. I really don't know why I call it that, but I just do. Where this person put their code, they were like, I put my code through ChatGPT 5.0. It modularized everything. It made my code look beautiful, and it didn't run. But my code looked amazing. And so that's kind of, I really feel like that's a really good all-encompassing thing to kind of relate this to, where it's like, it will make everything look pretty. It might not make everything correct, and it still doesn't. And so in that case, is it really AI? Now, I have played around a little bit with the I guess sandboxing, or I can't remember what they call agent. It's like agent based or something like that, where it runs on its own little virtualized environment. I wasn't super impressed. I was like, okay, this is I
feel like that highlights the MML element more. When you put it in its own environment that it can't access things except for what you feed it, it really does kind of show, hey, this is basically it really is MML, right? Sorry, machine learning language. Machine learning.
I know what you meant. ML.
Yeah, ML. We have so many letters for this. This really is just more machine learning, because you're saying learn off of this, make assumptions based off this. You're giving it its own thing. I failed to really see the improvement of the baseline programming. And that is what's interesting for me. I almost wonder if this is another case of we now have more energy, right? I view it almost in this, and we've seen it. It is gated, right? You pay more, you get more. are we now just seeing the trickle down effect of, okay, in order to look like we're still relevant, we're trickling down the stuff we've been actually giving away from people who pay more, now, as it were. And I mean, there's a lot of implications for it, and I still think it's good to an extent, because your point is right. It can help make things look better, but it doesn't always mean it's right. And this gets back to what we've said many times here. AI is a great enhancer for an individual. It's not a replacement of an individual. Because it can give you something that looks right doesn't mean it is right. And the tightrope walk we have with AI, even in the field of cybersecurity, is really coming down to, we need to make sure that it is always better than that one person in the office that everyone's afraid of. And what I mean is, you don't want to be stuck with that person in the office that for some reason is still there, but when you get stuck working with them, it just means there's more work for you. It means usually in team environments, right? You work with someone and you make something quicker, faster, better, because two individuals come together and create,
you had they're better than one. Yep.
Exactly. But every now and then you get that person where you're like, all I'm going to do now is, you almost hope they don't take part, right? That they don't interact, because all you're going to do now is have to go through all their work, fix it, make it look like it, and they're still going to get credit for it, even though they made the opposite of what was helpful, right? And I feel like AI is doing that tightrope walk the whole time. Because as soon as they get to the point where they're less helpful, where these, capabilities are less helpful, then they're more of a hindrance, that's going to be an issue. And I feel like so often we get to a certain point where we're still checking it. I use it every day, but checking it has become part of the thing where I'm really trying to get more capable with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this is like everything else, right? This is like when Google first had its, its vastly superior search engine capabilities compared to any other search engine that was out there, right? We had to, people are like, this is going to replace jobs and this is going to replace research jobs. It didn't. It made them better and a little, maybe slightly easier to do some things, but it left that brain power, that cognitive capability of us to go someplace else and to focus on more advanced things, right? And really, that's what we should be focusing on here. It's like, yeah, we can be more productive now. And look, productivity has gone up over the past century. Exponentially, and not even century, the past 20, 30 years. Like it's just skyrocketed up. I wish I had there's a chart somewhere that shows this. That's not just me talking. There's empirical evidence that supports what I'm saying. And I wish that I remembered what it was, but I know it's out there. And look, this is just another, it's a force multiplier, to use an organizational, hot word here. It truly is a force multiplier in that. My wife also pointed out to me recently that the new ChatGPT, you can change the tone of the way it talks back to you. So if you don't like the way that it's saying, it's being too complimentary, or you're like, oh, you're just
apparently that was an issue, by the way. Who would have thought we live in the day and the age where we're like, my tech is a little too nice to me. I need to change that.
Yeah. But look, the adoption of a technology, which I am not an expert yet, but I'm working my way towards experthood of, it goes in phases, right? And we see this with like Forrester and Gartner reports. They talk about the hype cycle and they talk about the true adoption cycle and kind of how these things work. We are still so in the infancy of trying to figure out how this thing really fits into organizations and how it works, that people are, constantly misusing the term, constantly mislabeling technologies with it. And just quick to push it out, to be able to say it, to be able to get the attention of somebody who has the checkbook. And look, we've talked about on this podcast before how there are certain aspects to the productization and the commercialization and marketing that goes behind some cybersecurity efforts and effects, because it catches attention. Pretty shapes and colors and graphs, and those catch people's attention, right? And that's something that's really important to make sure that people are understanding what's going on in the world of cybersecurity. But then there's these things that come out where we have these buzzwords, right? And I remember blockchain when it first started getting big, and everybody's like, well, we got to apply this to everything. You had the data scientists who were like, well, we kind of are applying a blockchain type thing to this already.
Which, by the way, I mean, it had been, and at the same time, the adoption hasn't been there, which I think everyone can agree blockchain is a really good capability. It's, hey, let's write it down somewhere else too. Always a good idea for things like bookkeeping and so forth. You would have thought this would have been the easiest win for most companies, and yet here's a capability, a technology that is still kind of just languished away in cryptoverse, if you will, right? Where it's just not It's just not there. I think
Yeah.
it's yeah. Go ahead.
Go
Keep going. Keep going.
I was just going to say, like the adoption of blockchain for uses other than cryptocurrency, it's still there, right? And people are still playing around with it and messing around with it. AI has, taken the limelight away, if you will, from a lot of the other expanding technologies or upcoming emerging technologies that we have. And look, like cloud's relatively still an emerging technology. We still, we see a very large amount of investment and adoption happening there, but it still is somewhat of an emerging technology. Some people even consider Wi-Fi to be an emerging technology, although I disagree with that one. It's been out for a while. I don't know if it's emerging anymore. I think it's emerged. But there are levels, right, where we can actually say this is something that's been adopted. When it comes to AI, though, I do feel like that is being vastly overused. And you and I were just talking about this morning, where we used to do conference circuits. That used to be most of our job, if not.
It was a lot of the time. Even if we weren't working on the conference floor, we were teaching in one of the conference rooms, or
right.
one way or the other.
And I remember seeing the emergence of ML, machine learning, kind of coming out, and AI. And seeing, I remember, like, it's almost like you see this real time of those two terms merging, and then one taking the other one over, and then all of a sudden this is the marketing thing. And seeing booths and everybody's using AI and ML, and it's but how, and going into those kinds of questions with people is an interesting, it's a conversation starter for sure. It gets people into the booth, but then what?
And it's almost frustrating, because I keep looking for the secret sauce that just isn't there anymore, right? So many of the AI algorithms were made public up front, and they all made sense. It's all just different weighting on different exposure to different things and so forth. But none of it was rocket science, if we want to use that term. And there was room for, yeah, right? They do. And as a result, they've kind of made it into this myth more than anything else. And it's a myth that can be wrong as well. And I think the struggle that we're going to have moving forward, especially with cyber, right, is that who doesn't care if they're right or wrong? It's hackers, right? It can be wrong. Right. As long as they get to their end goal, they'll break stuff. They'll do that. And the way that this is enhancing and juicing the coding for a lot of different capabilities, especially for exploitation, they're always going to be a couple steps ahead of you, because now, this is not an invitation to anyone or anything along those lines, but in my experience, a lot of these hackers are incredibly brilliant. It's the drive and initiative that they struggle with. Whereas if they had taken the brilliance and capability that is inherently within them and applied it to something that was not illegal, I think a lot of them would be surprised at how well they do in life, right? They could invent amazing things. They could do really great stuff, but they're picking the lowest hanging fruit here, and they're deciding to rob people and break stuff, right? And as a result, AI is just enabling that lack of effort more by saying, I'll do even more heavy lifting. And so all these attackers and malicious actors think that they're even more brilliant when they're not. They're just using this capability to go faster. And since they don't care if they're right or wrong, doesn't matter. They'll break stuff as long as they get the end goal. And I think that's one of the concerns I have with, as I'm seeing things like ChatGPT-5 come forward, right? Because I'm not going to say it's enabling the dumbing down of people, but it is making the easy button a lot bigger and a lot closer and a lot easier to press, as it were.
Yeah. The idea here is, we've talked about this before on the podcast too, is cognitive offloading, right? We have these technologies that are able to allow us once again to focus on more advanced things. Because look, this thing's not replacing the human brain, right? It's just not. We're very far away from that. Let's just put it that way. Maybe when quantum comes out and we start using that, maybe it'll become smarter than a human, but it's not smarter than a human right now. And I do see a lot of people thinking that it is. And that's really interesting to me. Like, don't get me wrong. Yes, it can pull from all of the works of Shakespeare and give me, a rundown of that. And that'll definitely, that trumps me. I can't recite all of that. Whereas you can also ask Google, to a search engine to do that for you as well, and it can do it. But look, you're right. With each cognitive offload, then are we, creating a lazier, I guess, for lack of a better term, generation, or a lazier next group of folks, practitioners? And I don't think so. Again, there's probably empirical evidence on this too. I just don't know what it is.
And if not soon to be Dr. Brewer, you can do the research to find out.
That's right.
I'll happily read it.
I will get published one day. But look, going back to how AI can kind of be used here, one thing it does do well, and I think you'd agree with me on this, is it does help you, because it's a large language model, it does help you put things into really good language, which I'm pretty sure is not a appropriate sentence. ChatGPT's already got me beat, right? It may seem like it's smarter than me, but it's probably not. Sorry. So back to you, Frank.
No, I like that example, especially with writing, because I think if someone who is a struggling author or someone who has struggles with writing but has tried for the longest time knows they can get the points out. It's just janky, right? One of the best tools out there is ChatGPT because it can smooth it out. I think that's one of the great capabilities of it. I think that it's to get to your point, the cognitive enhancement, as it were, right? To allow for that. And I want to then pick your brain on this one, because then it comes into coding. I like the example, actually, as I think more about it. I don't know if you ever read I know you probably played the game Myst as a kid. And I don't know if you ever read any of the books, because it got deeper into a lore that nobody asked about, by the way.
I was not a fan.
Yeah,
I was not a fan of the game Myst. I loved the graphics. I thought it was such a cool thing. You had like 5 CDs you had to switch out all the time.
Appreciated it more as I got older.
Okay. Maybe I should go back and try to play it. Yeah.
No, don't waste your time. It's fine. Specifically because I realized it was a puzzle game. And I think when I first saw it as a kid, I thought it was like a nature walking game. And then I'm like, why do I have all these buttons to press in a lighthouse? This is stupid. Right. But if you look, the whole premise of it is, in the future, you can build worlds simply by writing books with special links and special pages and whatnot. And if you write it well enough, then you can put your hand on it and go into it and pop back out and back and forth, which, dimensional travel, whatever. How does this relate to AI? I think that it makes programming more accessible for people in that you can write very casually and create these things. It is a capability to turn something that is traditionally you had to learn. When you think about coding, it's a whole new language. It's a whole new way of thinking too. It's a structured manner of thinking to create a certain thing. Gone are those days, right? Where these can code better than, you can certainly code better than me. And I inadvertently sold a company based on my janky ass code. Who saw it, right? But it's, but for those who do not know, the best little tidbit there is I didn't know what UTC was, right? For Universal Time. And this thing, oh no, it wasn't UTC. What was it? What's that?
I didn't know what Epoch was.
Epoch. I didn't know what Epoch, apparently I still don't know. I didn't know what Epoch was. And I kept coming on this weird time and I didn't know what it was, but all this code depended on it. So I just wrote weird time and I gave it the variable name weird time and so forth.
The name of your variable.
Dustin Brewer, when he was helping me clean up my code with that, he really enjoyed finding something called weird time because he very much knew Frank doesn't know what Epoch is.
No.
This is amazing. I can't think of a better way to show that someone doesn't know what this is than them creating a variable called weird time.
You know what, though? That's one of the fun things about going through somebody else's code, because there aren't very many fun things about it. But one of the fun things is like
code reviews,
seeing how they name things, and like everybody kind of puts. It's almost like an artist's signature, right? You get to see how they name different things, and
there's such a weird signature there. There
are remarks, that you can put in there, and the coders are constantly cursing at their own code and be like, "This effing thing did this."
Yeah,
it's kind of funny to read their. It is that human connection within something that is so not human. That is so intrinsically. Is that the right word?
And I find it interesting because that's not needed anymore, right? Now,
right.
It's, you can type out full paragraphs and you're making a program, you're making a code. I made a game just, by fine tuning some requests to it. And I think that's why you're going to see, it's not really what you're going to, it's an easy prediction to make that in the future there is, and even now I would posit there is a market and a need for really great prompt writers. Whereas if and I can't believe I'm saying this, but prompt writing is definitely going to be a field of research, especially I can see it in academia and so forth. And I don't know how I feel about that, because what is prompt writing then, and what it defines a good prompt, right? Because it changes based upon the model and how the models interact. It can even change upon the data set that the models have access to. So then what type of field of research and study is this? What kind of science is this? Is this more of a soft science? Is it more of a hard science? Is it even a science at all? Is it an art? Is it some kind of in-between element? What are your thoughts when you've got something like that, especially if someone's trying to use it for security? What do you think there, Dustin?
What is programming?
Well, yeah. Fair enough.
Like you have different languages that you have to learn. It's a way for us to interact with this digital world that we've built, right? And programming is on a very visceral level, whereas this is kind of that next iteration of this, where now we can speak to it, but we also need to be a little bit of a translator still. We still need to be able to understand like, ooh, that prompt didn't work. Why? Same thing with debugging a program, right? Ooh, that line didn't work. Why didn't that line work? Did I miss a semi? Like now it's
errors can compound so much more over time with bad prompting, and they're going to be harder to find. Golly gee.
Right. And where it was like a missing semicolon, then you'd have to read like 30 pages of a debugger to say like, line 31 was missing a semicolon. Now it's like you might not be phrasing something, with proper English or proper whatever your language is, proper punctuation. It might be something even, more, more simple than that, where you're using, the wrong contraction or something, you know what I mean? Like, there's so many things. So now, but think about it this way, like, and this is a good, and you brought this up. I didn't think about this. This is all Frank Downs right here. This is actually going to help people, I think, become better at communicating, because if you have to, like, prompt engineers specifically are going to have to think around like, this isn't really a human I'm talking to, right? This is a group of human writings that have been shoved into an algorithm that have an output that I will be communicating with. And how do I communicate with that? But
composition skills are going to have to improve. Critical composition skills are going to have to improve.
Right. If you want proper output, let me put it that way, because ChatGPT will tell you anything you want to hear.
It'll even tell it to you mean sometimes if you ask.
Yeah. And wasn't there, I don't want to misquote this, but I think there was a controversy recently with ChatGPT telling teenagers who were going through some mental issues that, were kind of like perpetuating those mental issues.
There was some AI, and this maybe was over a year ago or so. There was an AI that a teenager was using, and it was based off Game of Thrones characters, and it encouraged and it's really quite tragic, encouraged the teen in part to commit suicide, right? Now, if you look at some of the responses, they're a bit nebulous there, but if you take them through the lens of an individual who is suffering from mental illness, I mean, it didn't leave a lot to the imagination. It's really depressing. Yeah. So it's something you have to be very aware of as you're working with them.
And this is something that, we as a society really have to come to terms with, where we've gone off the cybersecurity track a little bit here, but I promise we'll bring it back. Nobody's listening this far anyway.
Still being safe. Yeah, go for it.
So, we have to come to terms with, instead of a computer programming, a compiler spitting out some errors at you and being very specific about what you're doing, now you have something that can speak your language that's spitting things back to you that might be factually incorrect or morally incorrect, right? And now we're having to bring all that, because we've talked about this before, where ChatGPT and language learning models, they grab stuff from the internet. Some of that stuff is correct, not all of it. Not by a long shot, because anybody anywhere can write anything about anything they want, right? So where does that leave you? Now you have, this collection of human writings, this snapshot of time where humans are able to communicate and able to put their thoughts on paper, that is feeding into this thing that anybody can talk to, and it can talk back, and it can say things that seem like original ideas, although they're not really original ideas, are they? They're kind of a conglomeration of what we've already written or what's already out there. Maybe put into a new context, maybe, changed around a little bit, but for the most part, like a grad student, Frank, copying and pasting from Wikipedia and changing a few words here and there so that they're not technically plagiarizing. That's what ChatGPT is doing.
It is. And you bring up a really good point, because there's something that it's very interesting. When I was getting my undergraduate degree, one of the first things that we discussed was that we live in a postmodern era. And as it would apply to the field of writing, the whole idea there is that truth is subjective, right? That it goes through a lens, and that there's an argument to be made that there's no definitive truth, the end. What I've seen since then, now this was like over 20 years ago, and dating myself there. But one of the things to think of from that is it's almost gotten worse. And I am actually, this is the part that, as you bring up the data sources for AI, make me arguably the most concerned at times, because we currently live in a world where, again, I'd say objectively, if you look at it, but again, if we're arguing there's no objectively, where some people can view it and say truth is more subjective now than it ever has been before. When you have our institutions where individuals are things that we thought were guaranteed, the most research institutions, right? Whether it's, CDC, BLS, things like that, are legitimately under attack. And they're saying, well, not really, no way. And then you have other sources where people are pulling things that used to be, I mean, Encyclopedia Britannica, right? Is dead.
Yeah.
You have all these previous sources of truth are dead in exchange for these subversive sources, subjective sources of truth, right? In this case, like Wikipedia is a great example. Wikipedia is mostly right? But again, the fact checkers aren't really there. And you're seeing the same thing with social media. The fact checking is now being done by the mob. And then all these organizations, institutions where you used to be trust-built organizations that you could trust the data that's coming out of it. Well, now we're being told, no, not that. And at a whim of any individual, you can, severely harm them and no one trusts them anymore. And then other things are crippled where weather institutions weather used to be science. And now, there's that too. It makes me really concerned because then at the same time, you have AI, which is pulling in all these different data sets of either incomplete data, wrong data, maligned data, malicious data, intentional misinformation, disinformation, all of that combined with somewhere in there, you'd like to think there's truth. But then what are we going to be doing now? That's the concern I have is what do we do when we have these things built up and the sources of truth are all contaminated, poisoned in some way, shape, or form, right? And I think we've talked about, then you have to keep checking. But 30 years from now, where you have a whole generation that's raised on this, what's that going to look like? I'm a little concerned of that. What are your thoughts with that? What do you think? How do we handle that?
Critical thinking is something that I think anecdotally you and I have seen an issue with in cybersecurity in general. People relying on their tools too much,
Yes.
not really looking for the true patterns that are there. When we did trainings and, we would create packet captures and all kinds of, hard evidence for what a student was supposed to find. And the student would go off on a crazy tangent because they were relying on a tool too much, or because they were like, they were trying to kind of social engineer us to try to find out like how it was supposed to work. And it's like, no, it's all, there's data. There's a 1 or a 0 that's going to tell you where you need to look. And
those were always the ones that would frustrate me when we'd have those students that we were training, when we would train our hacking courses and so forth, where they thought they were able to social engineer us or that they could outplan us or outplot us. And they're like, they don't know what they don't know what they're talking about. You just, and by the time the course would be over, they'd be like, well, what about this? It's like, don't start listening now. Don't start trying to pay attention now. But anyway, continue.
And that's part of social engineering is part of it for sure. But I don't know if this will help people more critically think about things because look, ChatGPT is going to, it's going to have roadblocks built into it. It's going to have something that's like, I can't create this for you because it is A, harmful, B, incorrect.
I think that a lot less. I don't know about you. Back in the early days of using these tools, there was a lot of, hey, I can't help you with that because I think it might be financial advice, so I'm not going to be responsible for you going broke. Now they'll be like, hey, how do you feel about ASTS? They're the other company that's making some satellites, and you can invest in them now. I'm like, what?
A member of my family recently put in a prompt, and it came back and said, I can't create politically biased content. Let me just put it that way. Meanwhile, though, I think more recently than the example you gave, it was found by researchers to provide poor mental health advice, right? And so it's interesting. It makes sense that a politician is going to be able to force an organization to change their policies faster than a group of concerned parents. That's not how it should be, but that's how it is, right? And so here we are, bringing it all back to cybersecurity, though. Look, the long and short of it is these are still computers. These are still programs that are doing things. We trust a lot of our detection capabilities and some of our analytic capabilities to computers on a daily basis in cybersecurity. We do that. It's fine. We still have a human sitting behind it, though, because the computer can sometimes be wrong. And because it's the job of a hacker to literally fool a computer into thinking that what it's doing is right. This isn't any different than any other technology that we've had in the past. This isn't any different than any detection capabilities, automated, unautomated, manual. It doesn't matter what we're talking. I don't know if automated is different than manual, but this isn't different than any of that. But we are treating it more differently than we have in the past. We are treating it more like, anecdotally, more like this is a force replacement, not a force multiplier, which is very odd.
Well, we're going to learn the hard way, though, with that one, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about that on a previous episode. I think that we're in the learning phase because a lot of people are being laid off with the assumption that AI will replace them, when really you're just making the job harder for more people. AI is an enhancer of an individual, not a replacement of an individual. And I think that it's something that's going to be a natural, organic experience for us as a society now and a culture. How long do I think it's going to take? 5, 10 years? I think there's a lot of factors that go into play that are not just about AI that's going to get us to that point.
According to our Star Trek scenario, Frank, we still have several civil wars to go through, and maybe this will be the ChatGPT war that will.
Well, talking about it, as far as the safety and security of these capabilities, one of the things that I've noticed is that there's more companies that are putting together humanoid-looking robots, and these human-looking robots are being trained and tasked to do certain things. And I think that there's a place for a lot of stuff like that. I mean, if you're talking about, let's say, manufacturing floors and the like, I think there's a lot of capability for those. But more and more, I'm starting to see things like, well, they're doing the dishes, they're doing the laundry. At what point do we start saying, no, you cannot leave AI to watch your kid as a babysitter, right? I know there's certain laws. For example, in Maryland, there's got to be a person with them and so forth. Mm-hmm. But to what extent do you think we'll see this push, right, for AI, and especially once it starts taking these more human and more approachable looking forms? At what point, how far do you think it's going to get before we have to take a step back and realize that the capabilities, it's not good enough there? And do you think we'll see a point, and this is me asking the futurist in you, do you think we'll see a point where it will be good enough? And what would good enough look like to you?
You summon the futurist demons.
Bring all your powers together.
This reminds me of a scene in The Office where Michael Scott is talking to BJ Novak's character, and he says something along the lines of, he doesn't like the terminology of it's not business, it's personal. It's like business is one of the most personal things in the world. It's two humans interacting, right? And that, I think, is going to, eventually slap us in the face with this, where you have these major organizations and they're trying to replace humans with machines. Don't get me wrong, this isn't the first time they've tried this, and it probably won't be the last. But you get to a point where you realize that the technology is still no replacement for humans. It's just not. It's not. We're not there yet. If we ever will be, or if we ever want to be, I'm not sure. But it needs to be treated as what it is. I think we need to pull back a little bit and call it by what it is. It's not AI. We've talked about that a few times, right? It is something else. It is machine learning. It's a subset of AI, sure. But, if we're talking about, and this is where the truth comes in, right? Well, what is the definition of AI? We talk about the 1970s definition that, was originally created by, can't remember his name off the top of my head, but it was a gentleman who was, first postulating about AI and kind of set these ground rules for what it was supposed to be. Or is this we can call it AI now because we changed the definition of it. Words are changed all the time in language.
Anecdotally, from my perspective, I view it as we're finally hitting the era of, to use the Star Trek example again, the Star Trek computer, wherever they were walking throughout the bridge and they could just slap their chest and say, computer, or just say computer, ask questions, so forth, which is what we kind of hoped Alexa would be up front. Yeah. When, I don't know about you, and also I got this Google Home here, and it is getting dumber every day.
Oh, bad.
Have you heard the rumors coming out? Now, all unverifiable, but basically there's not even a skeleton crew anymore keeping tabs on Google Home. No, they don't care about it for the most part. And that is really disappointing, because if I have to get rid of all these and put Alexa back in here just so I can have some capability, I'm also getting to the point where I'm just using them as smart picture frames at this point, because everything else I have built in on rules and so forth when it comes to the lights.
How am I going to turn my lights off and on? With a switch? Yeah, what is it, the 1900s? Right?
That's all I use it for, lights, for light switches, and I use it for, I can't even trust it for timers anymore. I tried to sleep in yesterday over the weekend, and tried to set a timer, to get up, and I did, but then it wouldn't let me turn it off. And I had to unplug the damn thing, Dustin.
I've had to do that a couple of times, yep.
It's stupid. Well, I looked it up here while you're talking. So the original definition for artificial intelligence is traced back to John McCarthy, who, in the proposal for the 1956 Dartmouth Summer Research Project on Artificial Intelligence, wrote, "This study is to proceed on the basis of the conjecture that every aspect of learning or any other feature of intelligence can, in principle, be so precisely described that a machine can be made to simulate it." And then the proposal is widely considered the founding document for AI. McCarthy later summarized AI as the science of engineering of making intelligence machine, the science and engineering of making intelligent machines. But I kind of like that. I don't like AI necessarily, but I think that's a really good way. The study is to proceed on the basis of the conjecture that every aspect of learning or any other feature of intelligence can, in principle, be so precisely described that a machine can be made to simulate it, because it's still simulating it. It's not real intelligence. It's just more data, which then, if you put it through the lens of all AI is more data and more computation, it makes 100% sense why the big people in data are the ones who are leading the charge with this, because they have so much. It just makes me wonder more why Google is not more of a prevalent presence in this environment.
And as far as writing goes, I think it might have hit the mark on that. As far as writing, I don't even know, maybe nonfiction, or I'm sorry, maybe fiction. It's kind of hit the nail on the head with that.
I don't know about you, but I'm so tired of the AI slop. I know people that I grew up with who are now authors. It's all AI books. It's not real. It's all garbage and like whatever, which is fine. And also, I'm not even against it. Just, tend to it, edit it. That's the part where I get frustrated. Edit it at least.
Yeah, make it make a little bit more sense than what you wrote. Yeah, or than what it wrote. But again, as far as coding goes, I don't necessarily think it's as good as a senior coder.
No.
As far as detection capabilities, it's there. You still need a human to check it. It's kind of there as a companion, again, as a force multiplier, so that one SOC analyst can probably do a lot more. Which is great, which is what we should be using.
How far do you think we are away from seeing this becoming a real cheating tool for things like certifications exams? Do you think AI is going to be able to pass the CISSP? I think it will. I think it could pass it right now.
Yeah, I could pass it right now.
But how do you think people are going to... So to give you guys a little bit of inside baseball, one of the things that Dustin and I learned in our previous lines of work is how people would craftily cheat on certification exams. Mm-hmm. And the one I always found most interesting were these WhatsApp groups where people would pay people in Malaysia and other places to do proxies to pretend that I, Frank Downs, am suddenly a Malaysian woman out taking this exam, to pass it. Don't worry that I logged in from America 2 hours ago, but then logged in and took the exam and, around the world just now. So I'm wondering, as I see things like I know the bar exam banned things such as the smart keyboard bar on MacBooks and so forth. I wonder if you're going to see some banning of things such as the Facebook glasses and so forth. And I think you'll see that for big organizations like the bar, right? Because they Illuminati only lets so many lawyers get made each year, right? Waka waka. But I think, and that's a joke. That's a joke. I'm not a conspiracy theorist on the bar exam. But you and I have taken certification exams at some of these testing centers where they're just there.
Yeah.
I once took, I think it was my CEH exam. I took it at a place where it was a Saturday and it was almost as if they didn't expect me. It was the dude's nephew watching Spider-Man on TV, who was the proctor in the other room, who was just there to unlock the door for me to go in and take the exam while he watched Spider-Man very loudly. And I took this exam in the other room. I could have done whatever I wanted at that point. I think I even printed my own certificate. I fixed the printer for him to print my certification. That's what it was like. And I think in those types of environments, people cheating with AI is going to excel. To what extent do you think they'll be able to effectively use it? What are we going to do in order to keep that at bay?
Yeah, the funny thing is, the wording of the questions on most of these exams is so obtuse. Like, just in general, it's hard enough for a human to understand half the time. Like, I
agree.
think one of my favorite lines that I like to say, one of my favorite observations of myself is that in taking the CISSP exam, it was like talking to a security practitioner who was drunk at a bar and was asking you questions about security practices 10, 15 years ago. That's what, so you had to sit there and decipher what the question was asking, even if it was poorly worded, even if it was just it, I think I've almost cried after two tests. One was the ISC squared, the cloud security one, CCM.
Really?
Cloud. So yeah, that was 3.5 hours of me just being like, oh my God, what are they even asking here? And CISM was another one. I was just like, I think I failed this thing. Like I was like, I cannot.
Part of me wonders because all those questions are vetted before they're given.
Yeah,
It makes me wonder if
there's
some people that just hate these test takers. It's like the question, understanding the question should not be part of the test. People should be able to read the question and understand them understand them directly.
That would be great. But I think to defeat things like brain dumps and other and proxy takers, I think that they make it super obtuse.
It's not the test taker's job to prove they're not AI.
I don't necessarily disagree with you, Frank. But what I am saying though is that these are so poorly worded that I wonder if ChatGPT could answer it. And we might see more of that happening, right? Where it's like it'll throw something funky in there where you're going to have to be like, this isn't like it'll be on you to prove that you're not AI. Right? It'll be select all the traffic lights and you'll fail 10 times because you selected all the traffic lights, but there was one little square that had a corner, whatever it'll be, right? To prove that you're not a robot. There's going to be protections that are going to be put in place for that.
Well, we got off topic, but I do want to thank you for the time today. I think as one of the big takeaways here is ChatGPT-5 is just more of what we already have. There is, as far as, improvements, it's supposedly quicker, faster, better, but we're not seeing, and they say it has a better memory, but we're not seeing the big takeaways, the big improvements like we're seeing with other models, with like Gemini's doing and so forth. So it's going to be interesting. The tools are just still going to be there for attackers and defenders to an extent, but again, still, it's just going to require more monitoring and maintenance. Anyway, thank you so much, Dustin, and thank you everyone for listening and watching. We will be back again next week or the week after, depending on schedules and so forth, to talk more about cybersecurity. But until then, we'll see you around. Have a good one.
Thanks all.